Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're going to be exploring the world of William Blake. We've got a great text here on his life and his work, and I think you're going to be surprised by just how relevant this Romantic era poet and artist still is. So, what made this guy so revolutionary? I mean, he's got this whole personal mythology, like groundbreaking art. It's a lot.
Well, Blake really embodies that whole romantic spirit. But what's really fascinating to me is how he pushed boundaries in like every aspect of his life, his work, everything.
Okay, so tell me more about that. I know he had this like pretty unconventional upbringing, right? And was very outspoken about his political belief. Did that have any impact on his art?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even Blake's limited formal education, that was actually it was like an advantage for him in a way. It meant he wasn't constrained by all those traditional rules of art. He was free to just experiment.
So like almost the lack of formal training let his imagination just flourish.
Exactly, yeah. And you see this like perfectly in his illuminated books. I mean, these were completely unlike anything being produced at the time.
Yeah.
He was combining poetry, art, symbolism. It was something else.
Hold on, tell me more about these illuminated books. What were they like?
Imagine like a book where every page is a work of art. He developed his own printing method so that he could intertwine the words with the images. It was like he was creating this whole visual language.
Oh wow, that's incredible. I can already see how that rebellious set ties into like his support for, radical political movements like the French Revolution and all that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And he wasn't just an observer. He was really active in the political discourse of his time. And he even wore the red cap of the Jacobins on streets of London.
Wow, so he was really, really putting himself out there. So we've got this rebellious artist, right? Pushing the boundaries with his art, with his political views. Where does religion fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Blake's relationship with Christianity is it's complex. He drew inspiration from it, of course, the themes, the imagery, but he was also deeply critical of organized religion, especially what he saw as hypocrisy within the church.
Yeah, yeah. And I immediately think of his poem, The Garden of Love. It's a pretty scathing critique, of how the church can stifle joy and freedom.
That's a perfect example. I mean, he describes the church as this place of restriction and control,
Right.
right? It's like the opposite of his own belief in the power of imagination and individual experience.
So instead of like accepting the traditional interpretation of Christianity, he kind of created his own mythology.
Exactly. He took like all those familiar biblical figures and motifs and then reinterpreted them, to fit his own vision, his artistic and philosophical goals. I mean, he created characters like Gloss, representing poetry and imagination. And then you have Orc, who symbolizes revolution.
So it's like I'm taking these stories and making them my own. It's very bold. And it all kind of ties back to his idea that opposing forces, they're essential for progress and understanding. That whole concept of contrary states,
Like,
right?
absolutely. He truly believed that it's through the tension between those opposing forces,
Mm.
like innocence and experience, good and evil, reason and imagination. That's how we grow, that's how we learn.
And that's where his famous Songs of Innocence and of Experience comes in, right? Exploring these contrasting states through pairs of poems, like showing the same subject but from totally different perspectives.
Exactly. You've got the lamb and the tiger, for example.
Mm.
The lamb represents innocence, gentleness is kind of like unquestioning faith, very sweet and childlike.
Mm.
And then you have the tiger, it's this powerful, even frightening look at this darker side of creation.
It's amazing how he uses these two very different animals to represent those contrasting states of being. The lamb is all soft edges and gentle imagery, but the tiger is full of sharp lines and these fiery colors.
Exactly. And those contrasting images, they reflect how our perceptions of the world change as we move from innocence to experience.
And it's interesting too because the tiger, it doesn't give you any easy answers. It's full of questions that kind of force you to grapple with these really complex issues, creation, the nature of good and evil. He's not giving us like a simple moral lesson. He's challenging us to think for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's so typical of Blake's work. He's not preaching or telling people what to think. He wants to provoke, to challenge, to inspire us to see things in new ways.
So he's using those contrasting poems to kind of show us that there's not just one right way to see the world, that our understanding is always evolving as we experience new things and confront different perspectives.
Exactly. And that's why Blake is still so relevant today. His work encourages us to question our assumptions, to embrace the complexity of things, and to recognize the value in diverse viewpoints.
So he's not just a poet of the Romantic era, he's a poet for our time. This time when we're bombarded with information, it's easy to get caught up in our own little echo chambers.
Absolutely. Blake, he reminds us how important critical thinking is, how important it is to seek out different viewpoints, to be open to challenging our own beliefs.
So we've covered a lot here. We talked about Blake's unconventional upbringing, his radical political views, that complex relationship with religion, and of course his groundbreaking art. And running through all of it is this thread of like challenging conventions, pushing the boundaries. It's amazing how all of these, seemingly disparate elements just come together to create this incredibly rich and complex artistic vision.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in Blake's work, from his insights into the human condition to his masterful use of language and imagery.
Which is what we're going to do next. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of his specific works and see how he used his art to comment on the social and political issues of his time.
And we'll see how those commentaries, they're still relevant today as we continue to struggle with a lot of those same issues, inequality,
Yeah.
justice, the fight for individual freedom. And one of the most striking examples of that, of Blake's social commentary, is The Chimney Sweeper. He wrote two versions of this poem, one for the Songs of Innocence and one for Songs of Experience.
Yeah, that's right. I remember those. It's such a powerful indictment of child labor, especially that just horrific practice of using young boys to clean chimneys.
Exactly. And the way he contrasts the two versions, it really highlights how our perception of the world, it's shaped by our own experiences.
Yeah. So like in the Innocence version, the speaker is this young chimney sweep, and he still has this sense of hope, right? He even finds like a kind of naive joy in his work.
Yes, and there's this underlying sense that everything will work out okay in the end, that God will take care of them, But then in the Experience version, all that innocence, it's shattered. The speaker, he sees the hypocrisy of a society that allows this kind of exploitation, and even tries to justify it with religion.
It's so much darker, much more cynical view of the world, right? It's like the speaker has seen the reality of the situation and realized that no one is coming to save them.
Exactly. And Blake, he uses this contrast to really expose the harsh realities of poverty, of social injustice. He's not afraid to show that dark underbelly of society, even in a collection of poems that are supposed to be about innocence.
Yeah, it's this reminder that even in seemingly innocent settings, there can be so much suffering and exploitation. It really makes you think about who benefits from these systems, right? And who gets silenced.
And that's what makes Blake's work so powerful. He's not just observing these injustices. He's actively challenging them. He's giving a voice to those who don't have one.
It's interesting how he uses the image of the chimney sweeper to represent this idea of innocence lost. I mean, they're literally covered in soot. It's like it symbolizes that corruption, that darkness they're exposed to.
That's a great observation. And their job, it's to clean chimneys, right?
Yeah.
To remove the dirt and grime, but in the process they become soiled themselves, both physically and metaphorically. It's this tragic irony that Blake captures so well.
It's almost like he's saying that society itself is the chimney, and these children are the ones who are forced to clean up its mess, but often at the expense of their own innocence, their own well-being.
And that brings us back to Blake's whole idea of contrary states, right? That progress, it comes from confronting these opposing forces, from acknowledging the darkness as well as the light.
So it's not about ignoring those harsh realities of the world, but actually confronting them head on, even if it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. And through that confrontation, that tension, we can hopefully create a more just and equitable society.
And Blake does this by showing us the world through the eyes of those who are marginalized, oppressed. He gives us a glimpse into their experiences and forces us to confront the systems that keep that suffering going.
And it's not just social injustice, you know.
Yeah.
He also critiques the institutions that he sees as complicit in these systems, including the church.
Right, right. We talked about the Garden of Love earlier and how he portrays the church as this restrictive force that stifles joy and freedom.
Exactly. Blake, he saw organized religion as, often being more concerned with power and control than with true spirituality. He believed that true spirituality, it was found in individual experience and the power of the imagination, not blind adherence to dogma.
And that's a theme we see throughout his work, isn't it? This idea of challenging authority, questioning received wisdom. He's constantly pushing back against the norms of his time, both in his art and his life.
And that's why he's so relevant today, I mean, we live in a world where we're just bombarded with information, and it's so easy to just accept what we're told.
Yeah.
Like, he reminds us to be skeptical, to question everything, to think for ourselves.
It's like he's saying, don't just take my word for it. Look at the evidence. Use your own reason, your own imagination, and come to your own conclusions.
And that's a really powerful message. It's about taking ownership of our own beliefs and not being afraid to challenge the status quo.
So Blake isn't just a poet. He's a philosopher, a social critic, a revolutionary. He's challenging us to think differently about the world, about our place in it.
Absolutely. And his work it's a testament to the power of art, to inspire change, to give a voice to the voiceless, and to push us to create a more just and compassionate world.
One thing that really strikes me about Blake is how he manages to be both so deeply critical of society, but also incredibly hopeful. There's this underlying sense in his work that things can get better, that we have the power to create a better future.
That's a great point. And I think that hopefulness, it comes from his belief in the power of the imagination. He saw imagination not as some, frivolous escape from reality, but as the very force that can shape reality, that can inspire us to create something new, something better.
It's like he's saying, yes, the world is full of suffering, full of injustice, but we don't have to just accept it. We can imagine a different world, and we can work to make that vision a reality.
And that's such a powerful message, especially in times of darkness and despair. It reminds us that we're not powerless, that we have agency, that we can make a difference.
And he does this not by, offering easy answers or simple solutions, but by asking those tough questions, by challenging our assumptions, and by showing us the world through so many different lenses.
Exactly. He wants us to engage with those complexities, to grapple with the contradictions, to wrestle with those big questions that have plagued humanity for centuries.
It's almost like he's saying the journey is just as important as the destination. It's through that process of questioning, of exploring, that we truly learn and grow.
And that journey, it's often messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly rewarding. I mean, it's through that discomfort that we break free from our preconceived notions, that we open ourselves up to new possibilities.
We've talked a lot about Blake's poetry, but I'm also really fascinated by his visual art, especially his illuminated books. I mean, we touched on it earlier, but I'd love to kind of dive a little deeper into what made them so unique and groundbreaking.
Absolutely. Blake's illuminated books, they were unlike anything else that was being produced at the time. It was like this fusion of poetry and art and philosophy, all intertwined in a way that was both visually stunning and intellectually stimulating.
So it wasn't just about illustrating his poems. It was about creating a whole new art form, a whole new way of experiencing text and image at the same time.
Exactly. He developed his own printing method. He called it illuminated printing. And this allowed him to create these incredibly intricate designs where the words and the images, they flowed seamlessly together.
And he did all of this by hand, right?
Yes, every single page, meticulously crafted. He etched those designs into copper plates and then hand-colored each print. So every copy was a unique work of art.
Wow, that's just incredible. It's like he had complete control over every single aspect of the creative process.
And that control, it allowed him to create this truly immersive experience for the reader, It wasn't just about reading the words on the page, it was about entering into Blake's world, into his vision.
I've seen some of his illustrations, and they're just so vibrant, so full of life. It's like he's captured this energy, this raw emotion that just transcends time.
That's exactly what he was trying to do. He believed that art had the power to transcend the limitations of language and to connect with us on this deeper, more visceral level.
And in a way, his illuminated books were like the perfect embodiment of his whole concept of contrary states.
Right.
He was merging the worlds of poetry and visual art, the physical and the spiritual, the real and the imagined.
Exactly. He was breaking down those barriers between these different modes of expression and creating something entirely new, something truly innovative.
So he was a true visionary, not just in his ideas, but also in the way that he brought those ideas to life through his art.
And his legacy, it continues to inspire artists and thinkers today.
Sure.
He reminds us that creativity, it knows no bounds, that we can push the boundaries of form and expression, and that art, it has the power to transform the way we see the world.
And that's definitely something worth celebrating. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit, it can still create beauty and meaning and hope.
And that's a message that we need now more than ever, I think, in a world that often feels so fractured and divided. Blake's vision of unity, of embracing contraries, of celebrating the power of imagination, it offers us a path forward, a way to heal, to connect, and to create a better future.
It's pretty amazing to think about someone writing back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it still feels so relevant today. What do you think it is about Blake's work that still resonates with people?
I think it's his ability to tap into those, universal human experiences, the things that go beyond time and place, like his exploration of innocence and experience, his questioning of authority, his search for meaning and purpose. These are all things that we grapple with, no matter when we live, no matter where we are.
And he does it in a way that's both intellectually stimulating, right? But also emotionally engaging. He's not afraid to challenge us, to make us a little uncomfortable, to force us to confront those really difficult questions that we often try to avoid.
Exactly. He's not interested in giving us easy answers, or those simplistic solutions. He wants us to think for ourselves, to really engage with the complexity of the world, and then come to our own conclusions.
It's like he's saying, don't just accept what you're told, question everything, look for that deeper meaning. Use your own imagination to make sense of it all.
And that's such a powerful message, especially now, I think. In a world where we're just bombarded with information from every direction, Blake, he reminds us to be critical thinkers, to be discerning, to be skeptical, but also to be open to new ideas, to different perspectives.
So he's not just a poet of the Romantic era. He's a poet for the digital age, a time when it's more important than ever to be able to, sort through all this information and to form our own opinions.
Absolutely. And his emphasis on the power of the imagination, that's particularly relevant, I think, in a world that's so dominated by technology. He reminds us that technology, it's a tool, but it's really our imagination that drives innovation, that drives progress.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, don't let technology limit your thinking. Use it to fuel your creativity, to explore new ideas, to imagine those new possibilities.
And that's where his whole concept of fourfold vision comes in.
Yeah.
He believed that we need to cultivate all levels of our perception, from the sensory to the imaginative, in order to really, truly understand the world.
So it's not just about seeing with our eyes. It's about seeing with our minds, with our hearts, with our souls.
Exactly. It's about expanding our awareness, challenging our preconceived notions, and opening ourselves up to new ways of seeing and experiencing things.
And that's a lifelong journey, isn't it? It's not something we just achieve overnight. It's about, constantly challenging ourselves, pushing ourselves to see things from those different perspectives, and just embracing the complexity of life.
And Blake's work, it kind of provides a roadmap for that journey. It's a guide to navigating all the complexities of being human, to grappling with those big questions, and finding meaning, finding purpose in a world that can often feel pretty chaotic and uncertain.
So if there was one thing that you hope listeners will take away from this deep dive into William Blake, what would it be? What message do you think is the most important for us today?
I think it's that reminder that we all have the power to create, to imagine, to transform ourselves and the world around us. We're not just passive observers. We're active participants in this ongoing creation of reality.
And that's a really empowering message, isn't it? That we're not powerless, that we have agency, that we can actually make a difference.
Exactly. And Blake's life and work, they're a testament to that power. He faced so many challenges, but he never gave up on his vision, his belief in the power of imagination to make a better world.
And his legacy, it continues to inspire us to do the same, right? To think differently, to see the world with new eyes, and to dare to imagine a future that's more just, more compassionate, more aligned with our deepest hopes and aspirations.
Just like Blake himself wrote, what is now proved was once only imagined.
So let's all go out and imagine something amazing.